As you're aware, the concept of phallic woman is Freud's concept, and it's, from some quarters, particularly feminist quarters, a highly debatable concept. Nonetheless, it has a certain psychodynamic validity. I hope I'm master of this machine, and I have a fair number of images to show you, except for various reasons having to do with copyright. There was one image I described to you. I will focus mostly on this comparison, which will be my point of departure. That's Louise Bourgeois. And is she smiling because she no longer has to envy the penis now that she has one in her clutches? What you're looking at is a very famous photograph by Robert Mapplethorpe of Louise Bourgeois in 1982, and she's carrying a work called Filette, one of her most famous works, in her hand, a sculpture she made in 1982. Speaking about this work in 1998, Bourgeois said, quote, "When I wanted to represent something I loved, I obviously represented a little penis," close quote. But Filette is not such a little penis. A clitoris, as the title suggests, and Filette is, of course, female form, so it's not exactly a male penis, although it looks like a male penis. Okay. In fact, Filette, which you see her carrying there, please notice the way she's carrying it compared to the other one. We're going to make an extensive comparison of these two. It is huge, almost as huge as the giant phallus that you see in this image that a woman carries, and this is painted on an attic vase by the so-called painter of Pan. It's dated to about the third century BC. The date is not exactly finalized. As Peter Webb tells us, such enormous phalluses were dedicated to Dionysius and ritually carried in ceremony processions by naked women who often straddled them to ensure fertility, their fertility symbols in other words, and, as Webb adds, for more immediate pleasure, close quote. It was clearly an act of worship in which the apotheosized penis, the deified penis if you wish, the erect penis as a sacred totem and fertility symbol, and thus of the generative or creative power of nature, was put to practical, personal, as well as religious social use. Now, the image that's missing I will talk about here, but I'll leave this on. The two converged in what amounts to the naked woman's appropriation of the penis as a prosthetic device, and Bourgeois did a series of images in which she shows a female figure with a prosthetic device. The one I wanted to show you, which I couldn't get a hold of for a variety of complicated reasons, is a piece she did in 1997, a copulating couple. They are made of cloth, the couple, black cloth, and she often used old cloth, cast-off clothing from her family. And the female, who is underneath the male, has a gigantic prosthetic leg, okay? This leg is in effect a substitute penis displaced downward, what the analysts call displaced downward or displaced upward, and enlarged, making it ironically more emphatic and important, indeed the most prominent, differentiated, and vivid feature of her otherwise featureless, anonymous, headless black body. And both male and female figures are absolutely without identity, without any particular individual features at all. They're just black lumps of cloth, basically. The usual penis is 5 and luckily 7 inches when erect, but the prosthetic penis is enormous. In fact, it's a whole leg, suggesting that it symbolizes the greatness of woman's desire. And one of the importances of Louise as a body artist dealing with that is she is one of the first artists who talks about woman's desire, not man's desire, woman's desire. Or else her exaggeration of the penis's power under the spell of her desire, perhaps unconsciously more for the penis than the man who normally has it. The prosthetic leg takes it away from her male partner and adds a jarring note to the couple's intercourse, undermining it by suggesting that the female only needs the man nominally for his penis, not himself. Now, let's look back at this comparison. In the ancient Greek representation, by the painter of Pan, the gigantic penis is a self-validating thing in itself, imbued with God's universal power to create. It is thus transcendently ideal, absolutely perfect in both form and substance. It is the unmoved mover that moves everything else. However ostensibly ugly, it has the perverse beauty that absolute power confers. It is reliably magical. A dildo, it's a dildo, that never fails to fulfill the woman's wishes, for it is permanently erect and can be used whenever she wants to. She is in control of it, and with that, of its power. It is completely in her hands, literally in both cases, as both the bourgeois photograph and the Greek vase painting show. The point of the ancient religious ceremony was to transform any old penis into the one and only phallus. And phallus is a term used for power. A penis is a symbol of power, not the actual physical organ. In other words, it's an imaginative creation. All of the profane penises in the world become the one sacred penis, by way of what might be called psychic alchemy, which to me, I understand in terms of Coleridge's idea of what he calls primary imagination. Let me just tell you what he says, quoting Coleridge: the living power and prime agent of all human perception, a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. Okay. And for Coleridge, this is the basis of what he calls, and what I would agree with, authentic or primary art. Okay. And so by means of this psychic alchemy, an ordinary penis becomes an extraordinary phallus, that is a work of sacred art, that is a theme of joy forever, which is exactly what bourgeois fillet is. It confirms that bourgeois is a primary artist, that is an artist who makes authentically imaginative art, in contrast to what Coleridge calls, the important distinction here, fanciful art, that is art which is the mode of memory, and so more empirical than eternal. That is art which is incapable of transforming the facts of life into eternal truths, and thus a creative failure, however interesting it may be. Only through imagination can art achieve the credibility of being universal. Fancy brings transient particulars into short-sighted focus. In both the photograph and the vase, to go back to them, the penis is no longer a part of the male body. It's an especially meaningful and valuable part object, as the psychoanalysts called such a thing, but meaningful and valuable in itself. It comes into its own, as it were, in bourgeois' handling and holding, and the naked Greek woman's handling and holding. Ritually masturbating with the all-powerful dildo, and one may recall that Freud calls masturbation the executive agent of infantile sexuality, close quote. That is, sexuality whose exclusive object is one's own immature body. The naked Greek woman mystically, as it were, impregnates herself, thus symbolically fulfilling her wish for a baby without having to copulate with a man. So it's a symbol of parthenogenesis. She, in effect, copulates with herself, for the dildo has made her a man. It's in effect her own penis. The baby she magically conceives in unconscious fantasy will be a virgin birth. Possessing the dildo, that is a sovereign phallus, not a humble penis, all the more so because the dildo will never have to endure detumescence, as the poor penis does, but will always remain hard and hardy and ready for action, no problem with impotence or indifference. She avoids being possessed by a man and becomes self-possessed, as it were, that is, her own independent man. But she technically remains a woman. She has a woman's body, suggesting that when she turns herself into a man by performing with the dildo, that is, masturbating, she in effect becomes a hermaphrodite. And here we're dealing with the issue of bisexuality, which is core for understanding what's going on in the work of bourgeois. The hermaphrodite is an age-old